Look, if you're like me and you scour the internet looking for ways to escape the 9 to 5 system, you've probably been told that the only way to escape the 9 to 5 grind is to land a six-figure job or have a side hustle that's pulling in $10,000 a month. We've all heard the story of work harder, get promoted, keep climbing until you hit that magical 100K a year, and then we're supposed to finally feel free. But here's the truth that nobody tells you. You don't need a six-figure salary to break out of the system. In fact, plenty of people making $40,000 a year live with more actual freedom than people making close to $200,000 a year. And today I'm going to show you exactly how that works, and more importantly, how you can escape the paycheck to paycheck trap without waiting for some magical salary number. Because the system, truthfully, it's not just about money, it's about control. And once you understand how it really works, you realize you already have more power than you actually think. So let's talk about why so many people actually feel stuck. And I'm sure you probably know a person who's done this one or two times. Look, they get a raise, maybe make an extra 5 to 10K a year if they're lucky, and for a moment, they feel good. They tell themselves, they're finally making progress, and then the typical story happens. They go and they upgrade their car, they move into a slightly nicer apartment, they start going out to eat more, rack up credit card debt, start buying better clothes, planning more vacations. And guess what? That person's still broke, but now they're just broke making more money. And this is called lifestyle creep, and it's a trap. It doesn't matter if you make 40K or 80K or 150K a year. If you're spending almost every single penny that you earn, you're always going to feel like you're running on a treadmill. And truthfully, the worst part is the system is designed to make you think that's normal. Social media is programmed to make us think that that's a normal thing to do. Ads consistently tell you to upgrade your life. You deserve it. And social media is always showing you highlight reels of people flexing their new cars or going on vacation and buying just materialistic designer stuff. Meanwhile, banks and credit cards make it super easy nowadays to borrow money. So you can live this lifestyle that you technically can't afford. And so you can make six figures and still feel trapped, which raises the real question. If making more money isn't the answer, what truly is the answer? And there's a couple different ways we can answer this, but the truth is escaping your 9 to 5 really does not correlate completely to how much you actually earn. It's about the gap between what you earn and what you spend. And some people like to call that the freedom gap. So let's look at two different people. We have person A. Person A makes $40,000 a year, and they spend $25,000 a year. Well, that's a $15,000 gap. That's money they can save, they can invest, and they can use to buy back their time. Now, person B makes $120,000 a year, but they spend $118,000 a year. So their gap is just $2,000. They might look rich on social media, but in reality, they're still trapped. So which person's actually closer to freedom? Well, it's not the person with the higher salary, it's the person with the bigger gap. And I know the $40,000 a year and they're only spending $25,000 a year isn't realistic to most people, but that's not the point. The point is that person has a much bigger gap than the person who's making $120,000 a year and spending $118,000 a year. And that gap is what gives you options. Now, these options can be anything. They can be options to save, they can be options to invest, or even options to say no to things that burn you out and drain you. Because freedom isn't about the magical income number that we all look for. It's about how much control that you have over your life and your expenses. So how do we start actually building that freedom gap? Well, in my opinion, the fastest way to do this is not about making more money. Now, if you go online, a lot of people are going to tell you the first thing you should look at doing is increasing your income. And while I think increasing your income is amazing, it's not the fastest way to attack that freedom gap. In my opinion, you need to start by needing less. So you can look at your fixed costs and your biggest fixed costs. So these can be your rent or mortgage. This can be your car payments. Maybe you have high interest debt and all those random subscriptions that you might not even use anymore. You want to audit your spending. And every dollar, think about it this way, every dollar you do not spend is a dollar that you do not have to earn at your job. So here's a simple perspective, kind of way to look at it. Think about it this way. If you can go through your expenses and you can cut $300 a month from your lifestyle, I'm sure there's plenty of people that can cut over $300 a month. But let's just say you try to cut $300 a month. So this could be going out less on weekends, or maybe stop drinking because drinking is very expensive. That's the same as giving yourself a $3,600 raise, but without working any extra hours, or honestly without doing anything extra. And the more you lower your fixed costs, the less dependent you are on a high salary to survive. So if you can live comfortably on less, suddenly, instantaneously, you have breathing room. You're not terrified of losing your job, you're not glued to every paycheck, and you start to build choices for yourself. And having choices, that's the beginning of that freedom. All right, so once we audit our expenses, what's the next step? Well, you've probably heard this before, but once your expenses are under control and you go through what you're spending, the next step is to build a safety net. Now, when I say build a safety net, I'm talking about probably 3 to 6 months of living expenses just sitting in a boring high-yield savings account. Not cryptocurrency, not single stocks, not an ETF, just boring liquid cash. And this matters psychologically because when you have a small cushion to fall back on, suddenly you're not scared of losing your job. You're not forced to stay in burnt out situations. You're not desperate for that next paycheck. All of a sudden, you now have breathing room. And that breathing room changes how you make decisions. You start thinking long term instead of, waiting for that next Friday to hit and to see that paycheck come in. And even if it's just 1 month of living expenses at first, that's still progress. You don't have to save 3 to 6 months of living expenses in 2 weeks. If it takes you 3 months or 6 months or even a year to save that, it's still proof that you're building a foundation of stability. And that foundation of stability, that's not what a lot of people have. The system does not want you to have that. That's something that really only truly financially free people have. So by this point, we've audited our expenses, we've tried to find where we can cut back on, we have a little safety cushion. Well, what do we do with the extra money that's coming in now? Do we buy, a nice new car? Do we upgrade our house? What do we do? Well, the truth is we don't do any of that. We don't put anything on credit cards. What we do is we invest, even if it's small amounts. And you've heard me preach this multiple times on this channel by now. Because the thing is, if you're waiting until you make $100K a year to start investing, you will never feel quote unquote ready. But if you start now, once again, it can be $5, $10, $50 a month, you begin to build that momentum. So you want to make it tangible. So let's say you invest $100 a month into a simple index fund. At an average 8% return rate in 20 years, it's about $60,000. And I'm sure all of you can invest $100 a month. That's pretty doable for most people. Now, if you double that to $200 a month, now you're looking at $120,000. And let's be honest, I'm sure most of you can find $200 a month to invest. It's $50 a week. And here's the wild part. Most of that isn't even from what you put in. It's just from compound growth. So you're not putting in $120,000. You're putting in way less than that. So while everyone else is buying a new car every 2 years to look rich and keep up with the Joneses, you're quietly stacking wealth in the background. So in my opinion, this is the most fun part. This is the part where you really start to see people grow. So we've audited our expenses. We have a safety cushion. We started investing. Well, what else can we do to break the system? Well, this is where you can get creative and you can be, it gets really interesting because once you've lowered your costs, you've built that safety net, you've started investing, your freedom gap starts growing. When you have a true gap, you unlock something most people will never experience, and that's optionality. Optionality means when you're no longer forced to make decisions out of fear. You can say no to a toxic job or toxic environment without panicking. You can take time off to go on a vacation with your family and plan your next move. Or my favorite is you can choose to start a side hustle, start a business, whatever it might be, because you're not worried about that next rent payment. And think about it. If your bills are $2,000 a month and you're making $3,500, you only have $1,500 in breathing room. But what if you can cut your expenses from $2,000 a month to $1,500 a month, and you find a way to make an extra $500 on the side? Now you're stacking $2,000 every month. And in 1 year, that's $24,000 that you've saved. And that type of cushion can literally change anything. And this is how regular people that you see on the street break the system. Because it's not overnight. It's not by winning the lottery. But by creating a gap using that gap to buy your own time, and then using that time to build something that gives you even more freedom. So some start freelancing, some start building online businesses, or some just invest steadily and coast the way through life. The path doesn't really matter as much as having the option to choose what you want to do and having the freedom to choose what you want to do. So all this sounds great, but the truth is, if you try to jump into this tomorrow and break out of the system by next week, you're going to lose all your motivation, because the truth is you need to shift your mindset if you want to think like this. Here's what you need to understand. Breaking out of the system isn't about some huge overnight change. It's about buying tiny bits of freedom every single day, cutting one unnecessary expense, saving a little more than you did last month, investing even when it feels small and kind of stupid to invest $5. The point is, imagine if you could buy a little bit of your freedom every day instead of, going out to dinner that night, or instead of buying the newest technology, or instead of upgrading this aspect of your life. I would much rather buy that little piece of freedom. If I could buy a little piece of freedom every single day, sign me up. I'd subscribe to that. So look, making six figures obviously isn't bad. I'm not talking bad about making six figures. I would love to make six figures. It can definitely help every single one of us. But what I've noticed is a lot of people get into the mindset that, and I'm talking from experience, this is something that I truly felt. I always told myself, if I don't make six figures, I'm not going to make it. But the truth is, that's not the only path out. Plenty of people escape that 9-to-5 grind on average incomes by just being intentional with their money. And that's where I'm trying to get to. So don't wait for that magic salary number. Start with the gap you already have. Lower your costs, build your cushion, and let the money quietly grow. Because freedom is not about income. It's about the control that you have over your life and your finances. If you guys enjoyed this video, hit the like button, hit subscribe. Let me know if you felt like this too, or you thought you needed $100,000 to escape the system. And let me know what moves you're making right now to escape the system, whether you make $50,000 or $100,000 a year. I hope to see you guys in the next video. I appreciate all the support, and have a good day.